Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. Today, we're going to talk about green garlic and others as a cover crop, the magic of sunn hemp, and making mistakes so I can share them with you. Yeah, that's why I do it. So generous. So let's do it. All right, well, lovely Tuesday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well. Yesterday was a relatively productive day on the farm. It was nice out. I got those beds prepped that I had planned on that I talked about, so I feel good about that. Got a couple more beds of lettuce planted, which it's starting to be that time that I will have too much lettuce right now because it's just growing so well, but also need to plant a lot more because here in about 2 months, people will be begging for it. And I got the tomatoes trained up a little bit closer to their trellis, which is a job that I had planned for Friday, and which was also already overdue, but had not planned to be a bit under the weather on Friday. So that job kind of went even more overdue. But yeah, effectively, pruning season has begun, and that, to me, is when this job really gets going. Oh, and real quick, I just wanted to give a shout out to a grower named Yuri in Ukraine, who I've communicated with several times over the years, and who sent me a TikTok video of a combine harvesting next to some sort of heavy artillery firing away there in Ukraine, and I just cannot imagine what they're going through over there. Yuri said that they had been called up and weren't able to grow anything this year, but listen to Growers Daily every day. So if you're listening, Yuri, we're all thinking of you and sending our love. Unimaginable stuff. Okay, so in my usual graceful transitions, today I thought I would talk a bit more about some of the mistakes I've made with our high tunnel, at least our main one. These are things that I think, especially for those planning on building a high tunnel for this winter, well, these are at least some of the things to keep in mind that are mistakes that I've made and how I would maybe do them over. First, I really wish I had taken some more time to get the ground not only leveled, but perhaps raised up a bit. The tunnel, which is a Rimmel greenhouse tunnel, who is also notably a show sponsor, so you should buy like 10 tunnels from them today so they know how much we appreciate them. Anyway, the tunnel itself is nice and level, but the ground is clearly not, as evidenced by the fact that one end of the tunnel is a foot or more deeper into the ground than the other, by the fact that I can touch the trusses on one end by standing flat on the ground, and on the other end I have to jump. It's not a bad slant, and you can certainly build on uneven ground, but we find that the higher part is a little bit harder to irrigate than the lower side, and that has led to some imbalance in growth. The lower side is also just generally wetter. Like water actually will get in there quite a bit. It can be a good thing, but it isn't always. It will straight up flood on that bottom side of the tunnel in heavy rain events. Another mistake I made in that vein was not really having a great drainage plan, which I discussed in another recent episode. Well, to be fair, my original plan was to install gutters and water tanks, and I've not yet gotten around to that. But I do regret not also planning for draining away the massive amounts of water that hit the roof of that thing and kind of collect in one area on each of the sides. I likewise wish I had planned my doors better. These doors are still fixable, but I thought I could get away with having them slightly below ground just to kind of keep the air from coming underneath. And I could do that, but for like a week. But now, when the wood chips or soil or grass or something grows in that little track area, the doors won't really slide smoothly or close fully unless I dig them out. Now, I can cut them level with the ground and fill in the area below them, but that was, let's just call it dumb. All right, so if you're watching on YouTube, here's the door, and you can see they kind of go below ground a little bit, and I have this little just trench right here, and in the fall I dig it out, and then the doors kind of shut pretty easily, but then every spring I open them up and they get refilled. So that little trench ends up full of wood chips and plants, which is fun. Also dumb was not really putting down some kind of weed barrier on the outside where the baseboards are. I had been so annoyed dealing with landscape fabric on our old farm, I was determined to find another option. And what I found was, well, now just a bunch of weed whacking. And that's fine, I guess. But it's a lot of work, and the risk of weed seeds is ever present. Now, I know a concrete border would be the ultimate in weed blocking technology, but I hesitate to suggest that even that level of permanence in the beginning of your farm before you really know your space even if you have the money. In fact, if you have the money for like a concrete border, perhaps getting electric and a fertigation system and like a ridge vent and those sorts of things, all those other little tweaks that can make a tunnel really, really great, might be a better investment first. Ultimately, our main tunnel is nice. It's functional. No issues with the structure itself. And I love that we bought the ridge vent. That was a good call. It really helps to cool that thing off in the summer. So shouts to Jackson Roulette for encouraging me to do that. So I love our tunnel, but I definitely see several things about it that I wish I had personally taken more time with. With our two smaller tunnels, although sure they are now more permanent with the infrastructure we installed on them, which is like trusses and a center purlin, ground post, wind bracing, all that stuff. I don't think of them with quite the same level of permanence because of how small they are, less than half the size of our main tunnel. They do fine on the slope, and my experience and dependence on them, especially this year, is lower, so I don't have as much expectation for them. And in general, I like that high tunnels can be put in a lot of different situations. Our friends at Grow Appalachia, for an example, install them all over the hilly, mountainous Appalachian region to help growers in those areas extend their seasons. I like that these tunnels can be kind of molded to different terrains and circumstances. So if you have the money and you really want to make a living off these structures, it is worth doing them the right way from the beginning and getting it all nice and level. But also, a tunnel can serve you well in many circumstances. So I don't want to discourage anyone who doesn't quite have the money from thinking they shouldn't get one if they can't make it perfect from the very start. But I do think those investments can really pay off. Anyway, things you did well or not well in your own high tunnel construction, anything you'd add, let us know, and we'll get to it on Friday, which is when we get to stuff. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, some ideas about growing crops as cover crops, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Ring of Fire. What if you could turn your brush problem into black gold? The Ring of Fire Biochar Kiln is your spring tool for soil transformation, converting woody debris into high-quality biochar in just hours. Biochar will kickstart your compost, retain water and nutrients in your soil, and provide habitat for beneficial microbes. Now $19.95 with flat rate shipping. Their spring sale runs through June. Don't wait to boost your soil and optimize your inputs. Visit ringoffire.earth/growers now to learn more. Also, for more information on biochar, check out the No Till Market Garden podcast interview with Kelley Wilson, inventor of the Ring of Fire kiln, that we will link in the show notes. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Jim Smith, who writes, quote, "Can we talk about green garlic as a cover crop, or maybe a winter crop is more accurate? I plant about 2,000 of my nicest cloves of garlic every year for bulb garlic, but then I take the smaller cloves from those bulbs, plant them between warm season crops, and harvest as green garlic the following spring. The green garlic all goes to a hot sauce maker. An example rotation might look like grow, harvest, and cut down tomato plants, plant small garlic cloves, harvest as green garlic the following May, and then plant squash in that spot. It really leaves the soil in great shape. Our frost date isn't till June 1st, and that might be part of the reason that the timing for this works out so perfectly," end quote. All right, Jim, fun question here. Basically, Jim has a good use for a lot of garlic and can use loads of green garlic in the spring. May is fairly early, just in case it's not clear in much of the U.S. for garlic harvest. Ours is, typically like our main bulb garlic is out in late June. So not only is Jim able to pull all the garlic early, because again, Jim is going for green garlic here, but that frees up the bed earlier for the next crop. What I love about this is, well, there are actually a few things. One, your biggest bulb garlic is going to come from your biggest cloves. So a lot of times you end up with these really small cloves off of a bulb that won't create quite as big of a bulb. So maybe you want to find a different use for that. This is a great use for that. Also, there are not a ton of crops that aren't already considered cover crops that will grow that well all the way over the winter, depending on your climate. For us here, the list of crops that would survive in the field over the winter are basically like garlic, mosh, and spinach and chickweed, which isn't a crop we grow on purpose, but seems to think it is. And I have long said that where I can sow spinach in the fall, I like to do so for that reason. If nothing else, I get a few weeks of spinach in March when it bounces back, and it is incredibly sweet, or at very worst, it's just a cover crop. Mosh, which is kind of like a succulent looking but very hardy crop, is a bit like that too, growing nice and happily all winter regardless of temperatures in the field, and can be harvested in the dead of winter. The trouble with spinach is that it's not the easiest crop to get rid of, meaning it takes a little extra work to clear a bed of spinach versus a bed of, say, garlic or even mosh that comes out entirely. Mosh is nice in some ways, and not to mention it's a delicious fresh salad green that chefs love, but the fact that the plant has to be cut entirely does leave the soil a little bit unprotected and vulnerable in the late winter. But the nice thing with Jim's green garlic approach here is that it all comes out at the same time. So it can be replanted at the same time, which, to be fair, you could do that same thing with mosh if you had, the market for it, for at least that much mosh. So I like Jim's approach and idea here, especially for those of you who grow a lot of garlic and have an outlet for boatloads of green garlic as well. That is garlic that has not yet matured into a bulb before it has flowered. There are also slightly warmer climates than ours, but also potentially ours, where you could use a single bed to grow out Walla Walla type onions, for instance. Transplant those to a new bed and then refill that bed with something else. So basically, you use that bed like a plant propagation bed. And now it's free for you to plant something else in like March. Carrots in some climates could also work that way, where you grow them until the fall and let them chill under some row cover or mulch as you harvest all winter, and then refill that bed once they are out with something else. You could maybe also do something like that with parsnips that you plant in like February or March here, and then you harvest in like December and January, and then once all those are out, then you'd have that bed free to do something else with. The one thing to keep in mind is that you may still want to add a little compost after the garlic comes out, just to ensure the nitrogen for the next crop, especially if the next crop happens to be a heavy feeder. But anyway, fun stuff, Jim. What crops would you all use for such a system? Let us know. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, fun in the sun, hemp. I tried. Be right back.
And I had you there to hold me. It was good enough.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Precip. Precip is billed as the easiest way to keep track of rainfall, and that is true, but it is a lot more than that. Sure, you can open the app and immediately see accurate rainfall totals, but you can also save locations to see historical rainfall totals, wind speeds, and all sorts of other nerdy details. Their radar-based technology means you can ditch the rain gauge. I usually have to do that anyway because the kids find a way to smash it with a baseball bat. You can ditch the rain gauge and start tracking rain and other growing conditions all on your phone. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. All right, back to the show. All right, so I've been wanting to do a series on the different summer cover cropping options. Like last week, we covered buckwheat. So today, I thought we'd talk a little bit about one I have enjoyed using on and off over the last few years, sunn hemp. This is a tall, vigorous summer legume that I frankly do not talk enough about, but has been a favorite of ours in years past, especially leading into garlic planting in the fall. It builds soil organic matter really well. It does not harbor harmful nematodes. It's kind of actually good at not harboring them specifically. It fixes oodles of nitrogen, oodles being like roughly 120 to 140 pounds of nitrogen per acre, depending on the condition, which it may be slightly above average for a legume, or at least in
the range of a slightly above average. It also generates a lot of above ground biomass, which may not make a perfect mulch, but can provide some nice organic matter to the surface. Although it's worth noting that sun hemp can also be quite fibrous, so that's something to take into consideration. Basically, that it will leave a mass of stuff on the surface for you to have to deal with later. However, it can have a lot of those benefits in a short amount of time, like 8 to 12 weeks, which is pretty fast for so much goodness compared to other legumes and other cover crops. Now, some important little tidbits when it comes to this crop. One, the seeds need to be buried about 1.5 or so inches beneath the soil to germinate. In other words, just broadcasting it on the soil surface ain't going to cut it. You really have to make sure that it has good seed to soil contact and seed to soil coverage. Two, it's a great mixer with things like sorghum Sudan grass and sesbania, both of which are crops I will talk about another time because they are both good summer cover crops, and that makes a nice little mix. Three, if you are on poor soil or especially sandy soil where root knot nematodes can be an issue, sun hemp might be a no-brainer to add to the summer cover crop mix. Also, if you, like many of our friends just south of us, do not get the hard, consistent frost that we get here in Kentucky to kill off, say, peas and or oats, then a later summer cover crop mix that includes sun hemp and sorghum Sudan grass might be the ticket. Those will die relatively easily in a hard frost or two and leave a nice mulch to protect your soil all winter and give you a good fresh start in the spring. Just rake off that mulch if you want to and plant and enjoy. Yeah. Last, sun hemp is strictly a summer starter. It will not germinate in cold soil. The soil really has to be in general like in that 70-ish degree Fahrenheit range, so that's like 21 Celsius. Also, fun fact, it's not just traditionally a cover crop. It is also a forage crop for livestock, but can also be used as a fiber crop for clothing, baskets, nets, and etc. You can just use your imagination. Anyway, thoughts on sun hemp? Experience with it? Let us know, and otherwise, let's wrap this Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to kick in over at the show notes. You don't have to anywhere. You can just go down to the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. She will help you out. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, we got our pollinators, Alicia Arzate, Vesalaya Gardens, Cedric Reed, Bill Price, William Wiley Madro, Richia Grant, Wish I Started 20 Years Ago, Dwight Yoder, Honey Works, Lynn Tompkins, Steve Hurlbut, Rebecca S., Mark Ravenel, Lee Shelley, Brian McCarthy, Larry Shepard, Martian Cindy, DP, Cap Brannigan, Little Row Farms, Hank Zecca, Ashley Sharp, Jill Crosby, Scott Roser, Norskagard Farm, Laura Britton, Alberto Diaz, Peter Broad or Brood, Jason Ruel, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner, Derek Page, Meredith Light of Granite Springs Farm, Grown Up Farm, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farm, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, and Jen Lawrence. This is the long list of people that they were supposed to pick up on their bike ride, across the country from, like San Diego to Charleston, South Carolina. But in the middle of their bike ride, the bike riders are like in the desert in Nevada headed towards Las Vegas because, a quick stop on the long journey across the U.S., it won't hurt anything. And they decided to take a little rest outside of Jean, Nevada, pulling off on the side of the road and throwing up some, tarps for some shade to take a snooze. But when they wake up, they see off in the distance near a couple of small hills what happens to be a legit oasis. Now, they were aware of a few oases, right? I think is the right term, there in Nevada, but this was not on their map. So although they feel cautious out of fear that this is some sort of mirage, they decide to go explore. Now, mirage, it is not, but they quickly find it is definitely not the oasis they think it is. That is for tomorrow on I'd Like to See the Desert menu. Who put me in charge of these titles? Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.